Today, we're diving into the enigma of Osho. You know, he's got to be one of the most polarizing, most provocative spiritual figures of the entire 20th century.
And let me tell you, his story is anything but simple. It's this wild, fascinating, sometimes even shocking mix of really deep spiritual insights on one hand and just massive public controversy on the other. I mean, he attracted millions of followers, but probably just as many critics.
So that's really the big question we're tackling today, right? How did this philosophy professor from a tiny village in India become a global phenomenon, one that was just surrounded by chaos? How do you go from Chandra Mohan Jain to the mystic Osho, with this legacy that's just this tangled web of enlightenment and, well, scandal? All right, let's get into it.
You know, for a lot of people, this is the only part of the story they know, the whole American chapter. The clashes with authorities, the criminal stuff happening within his community's leadership, his arrest, getting deported, the whole 9 yards. But to really get a grip on how things got so out of hand, we've got to go way back. We have to rewind the tape.
Right, so to make sense of all those headlines and the controversy, we need to peel back the layers. We've got to go back to the very beginning and meet the man before he became this larger-than-life myth. We need to look at the ideas that would honestly go on to shake the world.
So he was born in this small Indian village back in 1931, and his early life, it looked pretty conventional. He was on this academic track, a super bright philosophy student who became a university lecturer. But then, when he was 21, something big happened. He claimed he had this incredibly profound spiritual awakening, and boom, that just completely changed his path. He ended up resigning from the university to dedicate himself full-time to teaching.
And what's really interesting here is that if you look closely, the seeds of who he would become were there from the very beginning. I mean, even as a little kid, he was fiercely independent, he questioned everything, pushed back against any kind of authority. And this wasn't just some teenage rebellious phase, It was core to who he was. It was baked into his personality, and it absolutely shaped everything that followed.
Okay, so that rebellious spirit leads us right into his core philosophy. Let's talk about freedom through awareness. What was it about his vision for humanity that made thousands of people drop everything and fly halfway across the world just to hear him speak?
Well, right at the heart of his teaching was this idea of the new man. And you have to understand, this was a totally radical concept at the time. It basically threw a challenge to both the East and the West. He was saying, nope, we're not doing the traditional Eastern thing of renouncing the world and living in a cave, and he was also rejecting the purely materialistic, success-obsessed Western ideal. His new man was a hybrid, someone who could be deeply meditative and fully engaged with the world. You could enjoy life without being attached to it and be responsible without repressing yourself.
And this is a really crucial point. Most spiritual paths, right, they teach you to suppress your desires, to control your urges. Osho went in the complete opposite direction. He was like, no, bottling all that stuff up is what creates psychological problems. For him, the key wasn't to deny what you were feeling. It was to watch it, to become a conscious observer of your own mind. That's where the real transformation happens, through awareness, not through pushing everything down.
And this really shows you how practical his approach was. He looked around and saw that modern people are just buzzing with stress and anxiety, right? So he came up with these things called active meditations. They weren't about sitting still. They involved intense movement, shouting, releasing all that pent-up tension first. The whole idea was you got to get rid of all that psychological junk, all that mental noise, before you can even hope to sit in silence and find that place of pure awareness.
I mean, the sheer volume of his teachings is just mind-boggling. Get this. Osho never actually wrote a single book himself. His entire legacy is captured in over 600 books that were all transcribed from his recorded talks. And these talks were completely spontaneous. This huge library covers literally everything, from ancient Zen to modern psychology, even politics. It's a massive, and sometimes contradictory body of work.
So all these talks and ideas naturally led to a movement, the Rajneesh movement. And this is a key part of the story. The journey from Pune in India to a place called Rajneeshpuram in the US. See, for Osho, his philosophy wasn't something you just practiced by yourself in a quiet room. He believed you had to create a whole new kind of society, a new environment, where this new man could actually exist and thrive.
And you can really break this movement into two very different chapters. First up, you had the ashram in Pune, India during the 70s. It became this international hub, a real mecca for Westerners, for all these counterculture seekers. But then came the 80s, and this unbelievably ambitious plan to build an entire city from scratch in the Oregon desert, called Rajneeshpuram. And that move, well, that's when things really took a turn toward conflict and massive controversy.
And just like that, we've come full circle. The whole Oregon experiment, the dream of Rajneeshpuram, it went south, and fast. It led to these intense clashes with the local community, with the government, and ultimately to all the criminal activities and the legal mess that we touched on right at the beginning.
So where does that leave us? It leaves us with this incredibly contradictory legacy. Was he a catalyst for human potential, or was he a cult leader? How in the world do you make sense of it all? Honestly, his story is just a masterclass in contradictions, and it forces you to ask some really tough questions.
So was he a genuine mystic who, you can't deny, helped bring meditation to the West in a huge way? Or was he a charismatic leader who presided over a community that just spiraled into total chaos? The hard answer is, he was probably both. You just can't fit this story into a neat little box. It refuses to go there.
But if you look at it just from an intellectual standpoint, his impact is undeniable. He was one of the very first thinkers to so boldly fuse Eastern meditative traditions with Western psychology. And he wrapped it all up in this message of radical, absolute freedom for the individual. Whatever you think of him, that's a powerful and lasting contribution to modern spirituality.
You know, if you strip away all the controversy, all the Rolls Royces, all the noise, this is what you're left with. This is the core message. Freedom begins with awareness. You can't inherit truth from a book or a teacher. You have to live it. You have to experience it for yourself.
And in the end, he left the world with this epitaph that he wrote himself. It's the perfect final paradox, and it just perfectly captures who he was. It's a great reminder that some people, some stories, they're just too complex to be easily defined. Maybe they're just meant to be experienced.